Hello everyone, my name is Raimi Zhang, and this time a year ago, if you told me that I would be getting even a single finger close to a conference like this, I would be looking at you like you were absolutely out of your mind. I was always someone who gravitated more towards pianos instead of keyboards, and I was never really interested in anything STEM related or technology in general. Instead of doing my homework every day after school, I would spend hours messing around at GarageBand, writing songs and practicing my singing. And a little bit of a fun fact, in 2016, I actually had this incredible opportunity to be on one of China's top local reality TV show competitions, and I got into the top 100 out of 600,000 people worldwide. It was this, it was a really crazy experience, and from then on, I wasn't really able to imagine myself doing anything other than music. But then, in September 2017, I was just scrolling on Facebook, as we all do, and I happened upon this post that was talking about a youth innovation program called the Knowledge Society. And I originally thought it was just this nerd indoctrination program, but I applied on a whim, and it turned out to be an incredibly life-changing experience. The Knowledge Society exposed me to this whole new world of exponential technologies, and they taught me about how fields like AR, VR, blockchain, machine learning, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing were just completely changing the world at this exponential pace, but no one was really realizing it. And so 1 or 2 months into the program, I ended up plugging out my courage and I just delved deep into a random field that I chose, ended up being blockchain, as you guys know. Because when you're faced with so many good choices, really the only bad decision you can make is to not make one at all, right? And so I went to my first ever blockchain conference in Toronto. I wore the only blazer that I had in my closet at the time. I was ridiculously overdressed. And I was blown away. I was instantly hooked. The speakers talked about things like Web 3.0, the future killer applications of blockchain, and how it had the potential to completely change and disrupt the way we think about online interactions. And so the moment I got home, I instantly went on YouTube and I binge watched like every single Explain Bitcoin to Me Like I'm 5 video that I could find. And fast forward to today, a couple of decentralized applications and really awesome crypto startups later, I'm in front of you guys, and I'm so stoked to teach you a little bit about this really cool technology that will influence every aspect of our lives within 10 to 15 years. But first, before that, I really want to articulate why blockchain is important and why you should care about it. And to do that, I want to show you guys some pretty interesting headlines from the past couple of years. So the first one is when WikiLeaks was forced to shut down after the government blocked their bank accounts. And this one, when Apple was caught actively tracking and recording iPhone users' location data without their consent. And more recently, Facebook selling private user data to Cambridge Analytica. So I'm sure most of us are pretty familiar with this right now. It doesn't really come as a surprise. And centralized organizations and platforms have over and over again been breaching the trust and privacy of their users, and we're really seeing our private user data sort of become the product that these platforms can sell. And so more and more this leads to a bigger issue of our freedom of speech being censored online. But what if we could completely cut out all of the third-party organizations and the middlemen that are breathing down our necks every single time we open up our browsers? And what if we could build applications that were totally unstoppable by anyone and anything? These are called decentralized applications, so also known as DApps or dApps. These are essentially pieces of open source software that leverage blockchain and distributed ledger technology in order to operate in a way that is not only decentralized and open source, but also, most importantly, economically incentivized. And just to give you guys like a really quick rundown of blockchain is, you can think of it as this giant ledger of transactions that every single participant in the network has a copy of. And participants in a blockchain network are called nodes. They're essentially just computers that are running a copy of the network. And so on each person's individual ledger,
we see updates real time of every single new transaction that is being added to the network. And transactions are added by a group of people called miners, who essentially solve really, really tough math problems in order to be able to verify the validity of new transactions and add new blocks of transactions onto the blockchain. And so what this means for blockchain is that we have this really cool new protocol that is peer-to-peer, it's mutable, which means you can't really tamper with any information that has been put on it. And most importantly, we have this new financially incentivized way to facilitate data exchange with anyone in the world. Unstoppable data exchange. And this leads to two really cool things. Number one, dApps never die. So because dApps leverage blockchain technology, and blockchain doesn't have one single point of failure, you would actually need to attack 50% plus one of all of the nodes, the participants on the network, in order to be able to even make a single dent within a decentralized application. So we can see that this is a pretty stark contrast to a lot of the centralized hosting servers that most of our online services depend on today, because these servers are really, really vulnerable to single attacks. And it also leads to easier censorship because it's so centralized, which leads us to the second point. dApps never lie. dApps do not exist under the jurisdiction of any single third-party organization or group. And so what this means is that once you deploy your decentralized application to the blockchain, no one can touch it, not even the people who created it. And so when you have a dApp, the backend of the decentralized application is made up by something we call a smart contract. And a smart contract is essentially a piece of code that is deployed onto the blockchain, and you can think of it as an autonomous little robot that lives on the blockchain who is governed under the rules of immutability and cryptographic security of the network. And so what this means is that anytime you have an interaction with a decentralized application, you can be sure and have the peace of mind that the whole interaction is trustless. You don't need to trust the decentralized application because there's no possibility for your information to be jeopardized. And what this also allows for is that because smart contracts, these pieces of code, can they themselves own monetary value, whenever you have a transaction with a decentralized application, the money never passes through the hands of a middleman. It ultimately is a singularly peer-to-peer bilateral transaction between you and the code. And then you ultimately receive the results of the payment. And so this also allows for some really cool new applications regarding financial incentivization of interactions with your decentralized application. And so now, just to show you guys a little bit of what the structure is. So we go from the user event, which is essentially clicking a button on your application, towards the client API that sort of organizes all of your requests, which moves on to the blockchain client, which is essentially a node on the blockchain network. And the blockchain client is going to call different functions within your smart contract, and then the smart contract is going to process the transaction to be able to run the code. And all of that is pushed back to the user who sees the new results pop up on their screen. And just to show you guys, oh, it's okay, it's all right. Yeah, just go to the next one, but it was just a little demo of a dApp that I built. But just to talk a little bit about some real industry applications, because a lot of the criticism about blockchain is that it's sort of a solution that doesn't really have a problem. But more and more we're realizing that blockchain can actually be the answer to a lot of really, really big and important problems in many industries. And so the first one to talk a little bit about is supply chain. So in supply chain, we can sort of consider that there are two main big problems. The first one is that stakeholders in a supply chain aren't incentivized to share information about how a product was manufactured, stored, or transported, because number one, of course, they're fearful of jeopardizing the privacy of their clients, and number two, they also don't want their competitors to know what they're up to and how their processes work. And then the second biggest issue is that within supply chain, from stakeholder to stakeholder, the data is stored in a different database and format. And so what this means is that it's really tedious to transfer information to the next stakeholder. By using a distributed ledger or a blockchain application to be able to be the underlying protocol for a supply chain, we can really see a more seamless transition of data and a more seamless way to really secure your information in order that you can be sure that the next stakeholder doesn't really know what you're up to, but can still verify the validity of your information. The next one is identity. And so in the 21st century, identity is really complex, right? We have so much paper documentation, and it's like a huge headache for governments and businesses alike. And so if we can use the blockchain for identity management, we'll really be able to have all of that information about a person in one really accessible place that's still really, really secure. And we can attach different metadata to that information in order to comply with the government's requirements. So that's a really interesting application. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is healthcare. And so in healthcare, data security and security of the information and ease of access is important like in any other industry, but especially in healthcare, where access to a patient's records can mean life or death in a really urgent situation. And so if we can use ADAPT to facilitate that access to this information, it would completely change the way that healthcare providers can actually provide that care for their patients in a more timely manner. And so, what now? What do we do with all of this information? We have this really cool new technology, and we have all of the possible applications and verticals and the implications of it in different industries. So, the main takeaway is that you can change things today. Blockchain is such an emerging technology, and most importantly, the biggest problem is that the way online interactions work today is very broken on a fundamental level. So then by using and harnessing blockchain technology, even if you don't build things, even if you just inform people, inform yourselves, you can really be aware of the really big changes that are going to happen within the next 10 to 15 years. So what I really want you guys to take away from this is that when you get home from this conference, I would really like it if you could just go on YouTube and watch a 15-minute YouTube video introducing blockchain. There's a couple of YouTube channels over here that are really great resources, and also some Medium blogs. There's BlockGeeks, which is a site that aggregates different tutorials. And really just inform yourself, because this is really a technology that's going to completely change the way we think about online interactions. So I'm super excited to see what you guys will do, and I really want to thank the Chic Geeks team for the opportunity to be able to talk to you guys about this. It's been a really incredible experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rainey. I want to see her again in a moment, and we'll bring